Cyber Reapers. Hello, Cyber Reapers. Oh, tonight I'm saying hello instead of hello, I guess. Anyway, tonight or today, whenever, wherever you are, I would like to talk about a book. And yes, it's not even October yet, but I found this pumpkin plushie, and it was asking to be brought home. So, I can't anyway. And unrelated, I noticed that because I'm wearing a Halloween pajama top, so I just like Halloween year round. I wear this year round, so it happens to be close to Halloween. But it's not a spooky book I'm going to be talking about today. It's just kind of a mind-bending, reality-bending, wonky sort of one. That's a contemporary and a fantasy mix, and so that ought to be fun. So this book is called Otherbound by Corinne Duyvis. I just looked up the pronunciation. Corinne Duyvis. At least that's the closest that, she recommended online for native English speakers. So, I don't know Dutch, so I don't know the Dutch pronunciation. But I talked about one of her other books, On the Edge of Gone, a few weeks ago. How long has it been? It's been at least a few weeks, I think. And I enjoyed that book, and so I came across this one as being available in my library app, Libby. So I was like, you know what, let's read it, let's try it. And I think this was her debut, and it's really quite impressive. It's, as someone with dissociative identity disorder, I keep trying to figure out how to write a character with DID in a way that's fairly easy to follow, and ideally in a science fiction realm, like what I usually write. But it's kind of difficult to showcase more than one person in the same body. But this book, while it's not about DID, it does it very well, of having two people in the same body and figuring out how to work together, and also just other people figuring out how to interact with this person with two people inside the same head. It's more on the lines of possession than DID, but any story that has possession, to me, it has another layer of, oh, this is like DID, I mean, back when I had persecutor alters who would do unhealthy things, it's to the body or to the system or to other alters, personalities. Back then, it felt like we were being possessed because they would come in and do things we didn't want to do, and so it felt very violating. And so some of the moments in this book really hit, because it reminded me of that. And so I just find it neat how possession stories can have they can have overlapping sort of feelings and situations that relate to living with DID. And this book it showcases disability in different ways, and I'll talk about that soon enough. Let me get you started with the premise, though. So, we got two different people, right? Two different people, and they're in two different worlds, two different planets, possibly dimensions, One character, his name is Nolan, and he is, he's a teenager who has a fairly regular life. He, deals with having history tests. He lives in Arizona with his parents and his sister, and he tries to be a good brother to her, but he has these episodes that everybody else thinks are signs of epilepsy. However, it is not. But on a side note, he is disabled. guess that's not spoiler. Well, anyway, he's disabled. He is an amputee. So, like, in that sense, he is disabled. But he does not have epilepsy. What everybody thinks is, like, how he showed, or what everybody thinks is epilepsy is actually just every time he closes his eyes, he sees not the back of his eyelids, but a completely different world. He is seeing a fantasy world from the perspective of Amara. Now, Amara, I mentioned there are two main characters, two different worlds. Amara is the second main character, and she is a servant to an exiled or a renegade princess, a princess who, like, everybody thinks is dead, except for those in power who are trying to kill her. So this servant has healing powers, is able to heal herself. So because this princess is cursed, to where if she spills even a single bit of blood, like a paper cut, the forces of nature, like roots or stones or whatever is around her, will try to collapse in on her and try to kill her. So the servant girl is there to, anytime anytime the princess gets hurt, and princess, her name is Scylla, anytime Scylla gets hurt enough to bleed, Amara then makes the cut bigger and takes more blood, or takes blood from Scylla, so that Amara smears it on her own skin, so that there is more blood on Amara than the princess, which means Amara is the one that gets the effects of the forces of nature coming after her. But because of her healing capability, she's able to mend herself after that happens. So when Nolan closes his eyes, that world is what he sees, and it's pretty jarring because it brings him in to where he can hear her thoughts, he can hear Amara's thoughts, see everything that's happening around her, and just, it's a lot. And on top of the layers of what being in servitude means in this fantasy world, Amara had her tongue removed, and like pretty much all the servants do, so sign language is a big thing in that world, a big way of communicating, and so she's also disabled, and if we're talking representation also, Nolan and Scylla's the princess, the two of them are people of color, and Scylla and Amara are queer, and Nolan comes from is Mexican, yes. Oh shoot, Spanish speaking. Nolan comes from a Spanish speaking family, and were there any other representation points I wanted to say? I think just in general the cast is fairly diverse in terms of race and disability. I don't remember if there were many queer characters. I do definitely remember, though, out of the main characters, Scylla and Amara. But yeah, so it's so that was refreshing in of itself, seeing that in a contemporary fantasy. The main thing is just like these two worlds are separate, but they eventually collide in a sense. Nolan has gone his entire upbringing, he has dealt with the consequences of every time he closes his eyes, even like for blinking for a second, he sees Amara's perspective, and Amara never knew he was there up until a certain point when Nolan's medication changed, and he was able to take control of Amara's body for a little while and communicate with the people around her to let her know that he exists and that he's been seeing everything from her perspective this whole time. And that feels understandably violating to Amara, and she's got a lot going on without this whole connection thing as well, because, you know, the whole aspect of her entire, like, upbringing has been to dedicate herself to being the princess's, you know, failsafe to make sure she stays alive. And that's been enforced by somebody who, like an authority figure who stayed with them this whole time and raised them together. But there's always been this power dynamic of Amara being treated as so much lesser in comparison to the princess. But the princess also, I mean, she has a hard time dealing with making sure she does not bleed ever. She has to be very careful with her movements, even while on the run from people who are actively pursuing her. So there's just a lot of layers of what is going on with Amara's life. And Nolan largely doesn't really get to have his own life because Amara takes up so much of his time and energy. And it's too much for him to handle that, especially when no one else knows that that's happening to him, because he keeps it to himself. When he was younger, he talked about Amara to his parents and people, but they thought it was a hallucination, just a side effect of, like, epilepsy. And so he convinced other people that he grew out of the hallucination part, knowing that nobody was going to believe him into thinking it was actually real. And just, yeah, that was incredibly isolating for him, and just made his life into really just mostly about Amara. But whenever, like, that catalyst of him changing his medication a little bit, whenever he was able to take control of Amara's body for a little while, he was also able to finally, like, not connect to her. He was able to control it a little bit. Or they were together, maybe, sort of. And so he was finally able to close his eyes for a little while without seeing her perspective. And that was just so freeing for him. He could finally do more with his life and his time. He could talk to people without thinking about Amara being there the entire time. Of every time he closes his eyes, he doesn't have to think about how long to keep his eyes open. He can finally focus on his studies. He can aim to be a better brother to his younger sister. And I loved their dynamic too, the brother-sister dynamic, of just how much he was trying to be there for her, Pat, his younger sister, because she's so interested in theater, and so he wanted to be more involved with her life, and so he started attending her rehearsals and volunteered to help out with the theater production that she was in, and just things like that of trying to be more involved in his own life. But then things start happening in Amara's side of the world, and Nolan realizes that he has more of an effect on her life than he realized, having to do with their connection and their magical capabilities and such. Because of that, Amara gets put in danger if he is not actively present for her. And so he has to figure out that balance of how much does he need to be there for her in order for her to be safe in all of her dangerous exploits, versus how much of his own life is he willing to sacrifice for that. And it's just a lot. There's a lot to the book. I love it. I love the way that they figure out how to work together, and the way that other people figure out how to treat them as like two people in the same body. Again, that aspect is very DID coded, and I love it. And there's so much to the plot of, like, there are twists and layers, and with the two different worlds, it just adds so much more immersiveness for me. Because whenever I'm reading a book, like, if I'm reading a book somewhere, I am actively, if I'm, like, around other people while I'm reading, there's a part of me that is, like, sort of aware of what's going on around me, but mostly my focus is on whatever's happening in the story. And if I have to suddenly break that connection, it just, like, the world feels a bit jarring. And, like, my perspective is kind of altered or tainted by whatever it is I'm reading. So, with this book, it felt like that, but double, because actively in the story, there was so much, like, world switching that was going on for Nolan, that a few paragraphs would be, whatever was going on in his world, and then it would be like him closing his eyes, and it would be Amara on the run in a dangerous situation. He opens his eyes and he's in the middle of a conversation. It's really well written to have that jarring effect of really putting you in Nolan's head, and I appreciated that so much. I've completely forgotten what I was just saying, I'm sorry. I'll jump into something else, though. What else should I say about the book? Well, I guess in terms of the character growth, I really appreciated how self-confident, I appreciated how much confidence that, both Amara and Nolan gained throughout the entire book, especially of Amara just fighting for her own, fighting for her worth in other people's eyes, because she's viewed, like, she's looked down upon by everybody. Well, not everybody, but read the book to figure out who her love interest is, but, she really steps up of going, no, I know my own self-worth, and I don't deserve to be treated like this. You will listen to me, as I'm speaking, or signing. Would have been better if I actually signed the word for sign. It's been a while since I used to know the word. I used to know sign. Anyway, I'm vaguely, I'm somewhat relearning ASL, or American Sign Language, but I'm really on the basics right now, especially because my thumbs are not the most, well, I have pre-arthritis apparently, so I have to be careful about how much I do with my thumbs, which, like, I can't imagine. That's gotta be so horrible. Someone needing to use sign language to speak and having, like, pre-arthritis or arthritis. Like, God, that's gotta be horrible. I think I've heard somebody say that at one point, that it feels very, it feels horrible. Your voice, or your literal, like, way of communicating with people is taken away from you. So yeah, and that's also kind of explored in this book, of who understands Amara and how much she's allowed to learn about reading and writing as well. Just communication, a lot of limited access on that, and and who is allowed to communicate in what way. So yeah, it's a lot of that. There were two more things I wanted to say. One, I just wanted to briefly say, like, I appreciated how formidable the villain felt. Because, yeah, there is a villain, or you can say maybe multiple villains. And I think I can't really describe who they are without it going into spoiler territory of how the whole Nolan and Amara connection works. So I'm just going to say there is a villain, or at least more than one, and there's a lot of world building, and also the magic system is really neat. The way that that's explained, it felt easy to follow. I think it was enough. The rules were brought up enough times to where I could kind of predict, or I could understand where the plot was going without necessarily being like, I didn't necessarily expect the plot twists, but I wasn't, like, they didn't feel like out of nowhere, because they added up with all of what the previous information, how that worked with the magic system and everything. So I appreciated that quite a bit. And so, yeah, I think that's all I can kind of say without going into the details of how all that works. There were just a lot of, I mean, the plot went a lot of different places, and I think it ended in a satisfying way. I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to end, especially as it got toward the end. I was unsure. Like, I was just not sure where it was going, but when it got there, I went, oh, okay, that makes complete sense. So, yeah, I quite enjoyed all of that. And I think that's it. Like, I think that's all I had for this book. Yeah, it was a pleasant time, a pleasant experience. I read it, I think, in a couple days, and I feel like it really, like, I felt really locked in when I was reading it. I was going, I have to finish this soon so that I can, like, get the jarring, like, reality bending stuff out of my head, because it just felt so immersive, which I enjoyed, but also it does warp my reality if I'm so focused on a book. And especially this one just got in my head quite a bit. So, yeah. In a good way. Yeah. Alright. I should probably go to bed, because I have a bit of an early start tomorrow, I think. We're gonna see. The plans haven't quite been solidified, so, we're gonna see what happens. Mysterious things approaching for me, but also fun things, because there's some fun extra stuff going on with, like, my book, so that's really neat, and I'll tell you more about that later as it gets closer to being relevant. So, yeah, okay, thank you so much for listening. You are an awesome listener, and I hope that wherever you go next, whatever you do next, that it is fun and or relaxing and or feels worthwhile to you, and ideally all three, because that's the best, you know.